Hi everyone, I'm Walnut and welcome back to another Pokemon Scarlet and Violet VGC video. Today I'm going to be trying out some of the changes that I made to my team that I plan to bring to the global challenge. I'm pretty excited to continue to use this team since I'm starting to understand it more and I want to continue to develop it. But I have been using this team for a bit, so after this global challenge I'll be trying something else out. I'll show a preview of the two teams on my radar at the end of the video. If you want to skip the breakdown and changes, timestamps will be down below for the battles, as well as my updated Pokepace and rental code. But now let's go over the team. This team features Substitute Dragapult, and partnered with support Gyarados, you can use Paraflinch strats to get your Substitute up. Helping Hand will let you boost your damage since Gyarados doesn't really do too much, and Taunt can help you into annoying matchups like Amoonguss. There's no Protect on this Dragapult, but since Dragapult is so fast, Substitute almost acts like a Protect, but it only works for one hit and costs HP to use, but it can be used repeatedly. Chien-Pao can also boost Dragapult's damage through its ability, and together these guys are a nasty pair. If you protect Chien-Pao and Phantom Force on the same turn, your opponents basically can't land their attacks, and the following turn they'll have to choose where to target while also not having the freedom to protect. Amoonguss is here as a defensive Pokemon. With Citrus Berry and Regenerator, you can sit around for a while and soak up a lot of damage with Rage Powder. Spore lets you put something to sleep and slow down the battle, maybe get into a better position. There's no Protect on this set, but I found myself not clicking Protect too often, and Clear Smog gives me an easier answer into Dondozo. Rage Powders can also help with setting up substitutes or to redirect attacks from my frail attackers, and Pollen Puffs can recover lost HP from Life Orbs and subs. Flutter Mane's on almost every team, and this one's no exception. This one's max speed, max special attack with Timid Specs, but I replaced Power Gem for Thunderbolt. Power Gem is nice for fire types, but it didn't do as much as I'd like into Arcanine, so I'm going to stick with Shadow Ball for Arcanine and then go with a Thunderbolt to hit Gyarados and other flying Teras. This Flutter Mane has no bulk, but when paired with Amoonguss for Redirection or Gyarados for Intimidate, it is possible to take some hits and get off multiple attacks. Scizor here is AV with Tera Fire now. I had Tera Water to resist fire moves, but fire does that too while also making me immune to burns, but being weak to Palafin and rock and ground moves is a rough drawback. Feint allows me to break Gale Wings, and this sets up Flutter Mane for a follow-up KO, which can deny my opponent's Tailwind, which is pretty good for my fast and frail attackers. I also have Close Combat, Bullet Punch, and U-Turn to round out the set. I'd say most lead combinations can work, but I feel like bringing Scizor in the lead does need some more thought because I find myself in pretty bad spots bringing it sometimes, especially since it's weak to Intimidate and basically any fire threatens a KO. There's also a lot of Arcanine and Chi running around, so you'll often be forced to Tera. Chien-Pao can also be awkward to bring since it does reduce your partner's defense, so when it's next to Flutter Mane I'm especially frail, but at the same time you can use that to your advantage and switch in for more damage. I like Dragapult versus Flutter Mane because I think it makes for an interesting matchup, because you do outspeed and Tera Steel Tera Blast threatens a KO, and you can also go for Dragon Darts since it will double target into the partner slot unless they go for a Protect or a Tera like Water. Phantom Force is also nice into Flutter Mane and can either force a switch or just land a KO, unless they're like a booster energy substitute set. I still don't think I have the best matchup into Goldango plus Redirection because I do have to take a turn to stop their redirection with Taunt, so they can almost always get up a nasty plot. Bulk up Corviknight is also scary, but I think with Thunderbolt Flutter Mane I'll be better into that matchup now. I also think Chi-Yu can be scary because I don't know what set they are. Scarf Chi-Yu would outspeed my Dragapult and does way too much damage. I can also OHKO my Flutter Mane with an Overheat if it's a modest nature. Balance has been really popular, so I want to be looking out for how my matchup goes into those teams since I expect to face a lot of them during the global challenge. And in today's video we'll actually be facing Palance, but without further ado, let's get into the battles. So my first opponent is running Wo-Chien, Garganacl, Ting Lu, Sylveon, Glimmora, and Kingambit. So their team looks extremely stally with the double defensive ruins, Garganacl and Glimmora, but they do have some offense with that Kingambit and Sylveon, but they're both pretty bulky as well. I think Scizor looks pretty great in this matchup though, like I have pretty much super effective hits for all of my opponent's Pokemon. I'm also a Steel type so I can't get poisoned. So this guy's definitely coming to the matchup. I also have Close Combat to help me take care of Kingambit, which can be pretty scary. Of course I will be taking extra damage from Salt Cure if I do get hit, but I do have U-Turn so I can get out while also doing damage. I'm also going to bring Dragapult in the lead. Versus stally teams I might be able to get my substitute up and block some of the effects since they usually have pretty low power hits. I also might be able to bait in a Sucker Punch from the Kingambit and get my sub up, and then my damage should be pretty good into those guys. In the back, I wanted Flutter Mane since it should be good into Wo-Chien. I think it'd also be nice to just hit Garg for neutral, and maybe even the Ting Lu, though it does reduce our special attack. But with choice specs I still do a ton of damage. And my last Pokemon was going to be Amoonguss. It lets me soak up the toxic spikes if I set them up, and I can also heal up my partners too, since I think this battle is going to take a long time, so the Pollen Puff to stay healthy should be pretty useful here. And I can also use it offensively, like into the Wo-Chan. It's going to be taking 4 times damage. I didn't want to bring something like the Gyarados to this matchup just in case they had the King Gambit. Like a +1 King Gambit is kind of terrifying. Though it would have been nice into most of the other Pokemon on their team. My opponent's going to be leading the Sylveon and Garganacl. So I do have Steel options on both this Pokemon, which would be super effective into both theirs. I'm tempted to just go ahead and Tera Blast right away, but I am a little bit scared of Assault here from Garganacl. Because if you aren't using Garganacl to Assault Cure, it's kind of just sitting on the field and not doing anything. I could see them going for a Protect with Sylveon on this turn, so I'm going to target the Garganacl with my Scizor. I'm actually going to go with a Close Combat instead of a Bullet Punch. They do the same amount of damage, but in case my opponent switches, Close Combat should be a little bit better into the rest of their Pokemon. Like it'd be better into like a King Gambit or a Ting Lu. And with Dragapult, I'm going to go with a Tera Steel and a Substitute, just in case they do go for Assault Cure. I wanted to resist the hit and not let them break my sub, but turns out if I didn't Tera, they wouldn't be breaking the sub anyways with Assault Cure, so I would have been fine. Then after terastallizing the Dragapult, I kind of realized my opponent could terastallize too, and a terastallization on Sylveon, especially if it's Tera Fire, would be bad, so let's just cross our fingers that this is Tera Water. But unfortunately it is Tera Fire, so Scizor is kind of screwed here. The best I can hope for at this point is that they don't outspeed my Scizor, so I can at least get this Close Combat off. Luckily Scizor does go first, so we do get some damage with it, but oh wow, we actually get a ton of damage with this Close Combat. Of course Bullet Punch would have done the same, but these defense drops won't matter because Tera Blast is going to OHKO us anyways. Yeah, this Tera Fire kind of slipped my mind, which is pretty bad here. Because Scizor is kind of great into this matchup, so keeping it around would have been great. And they are going to go for Assault Cure. It's going to hit my Dragapult, could have been redirected, who knows. But yeah, it's not enough to break our sub, so we're not going to be taking any residual chip, which is nice. I'm actually going to be bringing in the Flutter Mane in for the Scizor here. I think I could have actually just switched in the Flutter Mane to take the Tera Blast if I had recognized that as a potential threat, because Flutter Mane does have good special defense, so I probably could take the hit. This turn, I kind of expected my opponent to go for a Tera Blast into my Substitute, so I wanted to dodge whatever hit they're going for by going for a Phantom Force into their Sylveon. It should do decent damage, but they do have some bulk compared to Flutter Mane, so I expected it to take the hit. They've already used their Tera, which is bad for the Scizor, but it does make my Flutter Mane a lot freer. They can't go for a defensive Tera on their Garganacl or anyone else in the back, so a Moonblast into that slot should take it down, and if they go for a defensive switch, it's not going to be that great because it should do a ton of damage. I really don't think they have a good switch into the Moonblast, except for maybe like an AV King Gambit, but even then I expected to take a lot of damage from this hit. So no protects or anything on their side, we're just gonna go for the Phantom Force right away. And Flutter Mane's able to pick up the KO on Garganacl with this Moonblast. Let's see what Sylveon goes for here. Hyper Voice would hurt, but they do go for the Tera Blast into the Substitute Dragapult. They went for Hyper Voice. My Flutter Mane could take it, but probably not too, especially after they get the Throat Spray boost. They're going to bring in Glamora next here. I'm going to be switching in Amoonguss here since I expect them to go for a poison move, maybe like a Sludge Bomb into the Flutter Mane slot. I don't expect a Tera Blast into that slot though, so I feel pretty safe switching the Amoonguss in. And I do have my Substitute up on my Dragapult still, so I can't take a hit, though a Hyper Voice would bypass it since it is a sound-based move. This Phantom Force does over half into Sylveon, which is really nice. And they're just going to go for a Mortal Spin here, so that's basically going to do nothing to my team. And it is a Hyper Voice from Sylveon. It doesn't do that much into Dragapult though. They are going to get that Throat Spray boost. So now at +1, they're going to be pretty threatening here. I'm hoping that Amoonguss can take a potential Tera Blast, but it's Hyper Voice, great. Sylveon goes to sleep because I'm going to be spoiling that slot. And with Dragapult, I'm just going to go for a Tera Blast into the Glimmora. This should OHKO most Glims, but I kind of expect this to be Focus Sash since the other item that they commonly hold is Assault Vest or like a attack reducing berry. But there's a lot of AV potential holders on this team like the Ting Lu and King Gambit, so I don't expect the AV to be on Glimmora. And we're about to find out. Tera Blast into Glimmora. Brings it down to its Sash. So not surprised there. We are going to set up the Toxic Spikes, but it is only one layer so far, so it's not the worst. They're going to go for a Dazzling Gleam, and it once again doesn't really do any damage. Doesn't even break the Substitute. And Sylveon is going to go for a Tera Blast here into our poor Amoonguss and pick up the KO. So at +1, Tera Blast definitely KOs. I don't know what I expected, so rip Amoonguss. We're going to have to be forced to send in the Flutter Mane here, but I'm a little bit disappointed that I didn't recognize that the Fire Terror Sylveon was going to be such a threat. It basically shut down my Scizor and Amoonguss, but we at least got a close combat off with Scizor. And now with the Flutter Mane, I can go for a Dragon Darts and Moonblast into the Sylveon, and this guarantees that I won't be taking any damage this turn besides the Poison Chip, because they can't really outspeed. I guess they could go for a Quick Attack with Sylveon, but that's really not doing enough for them here. And they're just going to be protecting this turn, so sacking the Glimmora to bring in their last Pokemon. So I could have brought in the Amoonguss a little bit earlier, and then that way I would be able to survive a Tera Blast since the Sylveon's not at +1 yet. So if I had brought it in on the turn I switched into the Flutter Mane for free, or if I had just let it instead of Scizor, I might be in a better position here. My opponent's last Pokemon is going to be this Wo-Chien, and I know that Moonblast is going to do a ton of damage into Wo-Chien. So I went for a Dragon Darts Moonblast into here, just because if they protect the Wo-Chien, this should OHKO the Sylveon. However, this turn is kind of a throw because the Wo-Chien is not a threat, and this does not guarantee the KO onto Sylveon. Because what is a Wo-Chien going to do versus a Flutter Mane and a substitute Dragapult? Like nothing. So I should have targeted both attacks into Sylveon to secure the KO, or just went for a Phantom Force and a Moonblast. But instead I'm going to Moonblast the Wo-Chien here. And Sylveon's going to be able to get off a Hyper Voice and do a lot of damage to Flutter Mane. If they're running Quick Attack, they could just protect this next turn, force me to take even more Poison Chip, and then go for a Quick Attack to finish me off. So because of my most recent turn, I have to 1, hope that they're not running Quick Attack, and 2, that they're not going to get this Double Protect. Because if they do get this Double Protect, it will be enough to stomp me out with a Poison Chip. So I didn't do the best job of taking down the Sylveon this battle, but Dragapult with the sub up and Flutter Mane were able to eliminate basically all of the partners. So it's only been Sylveon getting any value this battle, for the most part. And they failed the Double Protect, so a little bit risky in the end. Turned it from a guaranteed win into like a 2/3 chance to win, which is not the best. I think if I had to play this matchup differently, I would have hit Scizor in the back and let Amoonguss, then I could go for a Spore into Sylveon, now knowing that an unboosted Tera Blast wouldn't OHKO Amoonguss, and otherwise I would have just made small adjustments for better move selection and targeting. Like, why did I target the Wo-Chien? But first battle of the day, a little rusty, GG's to my opponent. So my next opponent is running Chi-Yu, Farigiraf, Stonjourner, Gyarados, Dragonite, and Flutter Mane. So they do have a pretty unique pick with that Stonjourner. I generally know what it does, like Focus Sash, Power Spot, and probably Rock Slide, stuff like that, Wide Guard, but I haven't had that much experience facing one. I don't really know what I need to bring to beat it, though I think my opponent's lead is probably going to be along the lines of Chi-Yu Flutter Mane or Chi-Yu Stonejourner, so I thought I would just lead AV Scizor. With my Tera, I should be able to take whatever hit Chi-Yu or Flutter Mane will throw at me, but if Stonejourner does come along, I'll be taking a super effective Rock Slide, and I should be able to threaten some decent damage with Close Combat, Bullet Punch, and U-Turn. I also brought Gyarados here since Gyarados should be able to take a hit from Chi-Yu, and Waterfall is super effective damage into Stonejourner, so I'd expect it to do some decent damage, though it does have a lot of defense. In the back, I brought Chien-Pao and Flutter Mane for damage. Dragapult is a bit scared of that Scarf Chi-Yu if it's that, and I don't really know how well I would do into Stonejourner, but maybe I could have also considered bringing a Moonblast over Scizor. I don't think I can bring both when facing a Chi-Yu since I can only Tera one, but I have seen Tera Grass Chi-Yu before, so I didn't really feel safe going for a Tera Water Amoonguss. My opponent's going to be leading the Chi-Yu and Stonejourner, so a little bit worse for Scizor, but kind of what I expected. We're going to be able to at least get the Intimidate on them though, so any Rock Slides or Rock-type moves that Stonejourner is going to go for are going to be doing slightly less damage. I kind of expected like a Rock Slide and Heat Wave from them this turn, so I decided to go for a Close Combat into Chi-Yu and a Waterfall into Stonejourner. They should break the Sash on Stonejourner and do decent damage. I didn't go for a Waterfall into the Chi-Yu just in case they went for like a Grass Tera here, so this Close Combat should do decent damage and might even put it into Bullet Punch range if they do go for a Grass Tera, but they're going to switch out the Chi-Yu here. And they're going to be bringing in the Gyarados. I probably should have recognized that the Gyarados switch is very free for them here. We're going to be committing to the Tera Fire, which means Scizor is in a pretty awful spot. So now we're facing down the Rock type with high defense and a Water type who just intimidated us. We're going to be landing the Waterfall into Stonejourner, but it doesn't even look like a 2-hit KO without the Intimidate, so this thing has a ton of defense, and it's going to hit a powerful Stone Edge into our Gyarados, chunk us down below half. If it got a crit, it would definitely get the KO. And this Close Combat is doing nothing into Gyarados. So I'm in a pretty tight spot here. I'm going to try to switch Scizor into Flutter Mane, and then I'm going to go for a Thunder Wave into Gyarados. I was just really shocked about how little damage I did into Stonejourner, but I don't have any protects on my Pokemon, so I think something's gotta go. I probably should have just let Scizor go down and went for a Bullet Punch or something, but I'm going to try to bank on some Thunder Wave luck to bring me back into this battle. So Scizor's going to come back. We're going to send in Flutter Mane here. I should be able to take one Intimidated Rock Slide, so I'm going to hope that this Waterfall doesn't land on the Flutter Mane. Thunder Wave into Gyarados luckily does hit. They don't outspeed and they don't go for a taunt or anything either. And Stonejourner is able to land another double Rock Slide. It does barely miss the KO on Gyarados, which is pretty great, but they don't get full paired and are able to KO the Flutter Mane. I didn't realize this during the battle, but I probably could have gone for a U-turn instead, because my Scizor is in between the speeds of Stonejourner and a paralyzed Gyarados, so if I U-turned there, my Flutter Mane would only be taking one Waterfall instead of a Rock Slide and a Waterfall, and I might be able to take that depending on the Gyarados' investment. But to be fair, I didn't know that my Gyarados outsped theirs because mine is pretty slow, so it's kinda hard to go for a play like that. Now we're gonna send in Chien-Pao next. I don't really think I have a way to get through this Stonejourner, because I really underestimated how high its defense is, especially with that Intimidate support, so I'm gonna go for a Secret Sword. And I brought the Scizor in trying to protect the Gyarados, but I probably should have just left the Gyarados in. So So we're going to go for a Sacred Sword into Stonejourner. We're going to miss out on the KO though. And they're going to go for a Rock Slide, and it does hit on both my Mons. It also crits the Chien-Pao, but I don't know how much that actually matters. But Gyarados does get full parried this turn, so we're still in this for now. I probably should have just stayed in and went for a Helping Hand Sacred Sword to guarantee the KO on Stonejourner, but I don't really know my Stonejourner calcs. So even though we got the full parry that turn, I still can't KO the Gyarados, so I kind of need another. The Bullet Punch is probably going to KO the Stonejourner here, so I can get an Ice Spinner off into Gyarados and get some good damage into it. The Bullet Punch is able to pick up the KO on Stonejourner. Finally, that thing is gone. I probably should have went for Bullet Punches into that slot earlier, and then Ice Spinner into their Gyarados. Does pretty good damage. We are going to launch a Waterfall into my Scizor and pick up the KO though. But with Gyarados and Chien-Pao, I might still be able to win this game with a lot of Thunder Wave luck. It also depends on who their last Pokemon is. And it's going to be the Farigiraf. I wasn't quite expecting it because I don't have too much priority on this team, but Farigiraf is a little bit scary here because they can just go for a Hyper Voice and do a little bit of damage. Turns out their Gyarados is Clear Amulet anyways, but an Intimidate doesn't really matter when you only have max 26 HP on your Pokemon. But I'm going to try to cheese my way out of this. I should be able to get a Thunder Wave off with Gyarados and outspeed their Farigiraf, but with Chien-Pao, instead of attacking this turn, I just went for a Protect. There's not too much of a reason why, but I was just predicting that the Farigiraf was going to break through Paralysis this turn. Thunder Wave luckily doesn't miss into the Farigiraf. And Gyarados goes for a Waterfall into Chien-Pao, but we did protect that slot. Let's see, does Farigiraf get paralyzed? No, it doesn't. So Gyarados is going to go down here. It's going to be Chien-Pao versus 3. A somewhat familiar situation, but this one is looking quite dire because I do not have my Focus Sash. But now all I can do is cross my fingers and hit Ice Spinner until we either win or we lose. And I just have to hope for full paras on their side. Luckily we do KO the Gyarados with this Ice Spinner. And Farigiraf is fully paralyzed this turn, so this is potentially winnable. They're going to send in the Chi-Yu again, but I think I'll need 2 more full paras to actually win the game, but those aren't the worst odds I've ever had. And I also need the Chi-Yu to not be Scarf or Tera Ghost, so I'm going to protect a turn, maybe scout out a Tera, see what they go for. And there's no Tera from their side, which is kind of surprising to me, because this whole battle they haven't Tera'd yet. She's going to go for a Dark Pulse, so fully accurate move. And then a Hyper Voice from the Farigiraf. So I have to target the Chi-Yu here because if I don't, the Dark Pulse will just KO, so I'm going to go for a Sacred Sword here. And luckily it is not a Scarf Chi-Yu and it's not a defensive Tera, so I'm able to pick up the KO. Now I just have to hope that this Hyper Voice does not land, but it does break through Paralysis, so Chien-Pao unfortunately is not able to clutch up the 1v3 this time. But I played pretty poorly this battle, especially on lead, and I did miss out on a few opportunities to get back in. If I had to change how I played this matchup, maybe I would lead Tera Water Amoonguss next to Gyarados and go for a Tera Water Spore into Stonejourner and Thunder Wave the Chi-Yu, or I would have let Gyarados Scizor in the lead and went for a Tera Fire U-turn with the Scizor to get Flutter Mane in. After breaking the Stonejourner Sash, I could KO it with the Flutter Mane, and then maybe Chien-Pao in the back and clean everyone else up. But GG's to my opponent, I definitely learned a lot this battle. So this last battle is going to be versus the Palance team. They're going to be using Arcanine, Palafin, Baxcalibur, Flutter Mane, Amoonguss, and Ting Lu. I'm expecting not to see anything too surprising on this team. The one thing I am wondering though is whether Baxcalibur is holding a Clear Amulet or a Loaded Dice, because it'll give me a hint on what move they're running. If it's Clear Amulet, my Gyarados also can't Intimidate it, but I think my lead is going to be the Flutter Mane and Gyarados here. I expect to see something like Palafin or Flutter Mane next to like Arcanine or Amoonguss in the lead, and Gyarados is pretty good into Arcanine and Amoonguss, and Flutter Mane will be able to threaten the other slot. In the back, I like my own Amoonguss as a Spore switch-in and for redirection against Palafin, and lastly, I thought Chien-Pao would be good into something like Ting Lu or Baxcalibur. I didn't want to bring Scizor into Palance because it doesn't really do much into Palafin, it's kind of walled by Arcanine, and it doesn't do much into Amoonguss either. I don't know how useful Dragapult would be here. It doesn't look like it offers too much in the way of damage, at least compared to like Chien-Pao or Flutter Mane. And my opponent's going to be leading the Arcanine and Palafin here, so we're going to be trading Intimidates. But their Intimidate's not going to affect my Flutter Mane, which is nice, and I mean my Intimidate doesn't really affect their Palafin because they're most likely going to switch out here. I think my play on turn 1 is just to double into the Arcanine slot because I do think Palafin's going to switch out this turn, but I think their switch-in is probably going to be something that'll resist my Flutter Mane like Amoonguss or Ting Lu. I don't know whether Shadow Ball or Moonblast should go into that slot, so I went for a Waterfall and Shadow Ball into Arcanine. This should pick up the KO, I think, and it doesn't really risk the Flutter Mane going down to a Flare Blitz because I do have the Intimidate drop on Arcanine, so I should be able to survive, unless they do happen to like double up with a Jet Punch or a Wave Crash and a Flare Blitz, but I think the Palafin is either going to protect or just switch out this turn. I thought about going for a Thunder Wave into the Palafin slot, but once again, they could go for a Ting Lu switch, but I hope they're not going to protect the Arcanine as I double into that slot. Luckily, the Palafin is just going to switch out here. And it's going to be the Amoonguss. I probably should have expected Amoonguss, because I don't know why you bring in Ting Lu if I have one special attacker, and I have a Gyarados on the field. This Shadow Ball into the Arcanine does a ton. They're just going to go for a Will-O-Wisp into my Gyarados, but we did recently switch to the Lumberry as well on Gyarados, so we're happily going to take this burn, and then Eater Berry and Cure it. Luckily they didn't go for a Tera on the Arcanine either. The Arcanine's gonna go down here to the Waterfall. And this is honestly looking really good for the team. Because Arcanine is gone, that means they have one less Spore immunity, and our Amoonguss is looking really good here. Because usually you want the Arcanine to threaten the Amoonguss, but if you don't have Arcanine, my Amoonguss is very safe. It's also really good for the Chien-Pao in the back, because the Intimidate, Will-O-Wisp, and Fire typing is pretty annoying to deal with. So I think I'll probably be leading this more in the future too against Palance. My opponent is going to send in Palafin on the Fainted Arcanine slot. Now that Amoonguss and Palafin are in, I feel extremely safe to just switch in Flutter Mane for the Amoonguss, and with Gyarados, I'll just go for a Taunt into their Amoonguss, since I don't have a Lumberry anymore, so I could get Spored. But the Spores into the Palafin slot are looking really good here because there's no switch into Spore. And without Arcanine, they just can't wall my Amoonguss. But we're going to be switching up the Flutter Mane here. They could also go for a switch on their side, but I don't know why you would go for a switch on that side when you just send in your Palafin. Palafin's going to protect here. But that's honestly really good for me because I was just going to taunt the Amoonguss slot anyways. And Amoonguss is going to go for a Spore. If it tried to attack, it's not really doing anything anyways. So now I'm just going to pretty freely just Spore into the Palafin. And I guess with the Gyarados slot, I'm going to paralyze the Amoonguss, I guess. I don't really have too much better to do with Gyarados on this turn. And I don't want to switch into something else and take an attack from Palafin potentially. Because Gyarados can definitely eat it up with that water typing. We're going to resist those water moves. Because most Palafins typically just run Jet Punch and Wave Crash for attacks. Amoonguss is going to switch out this turn though, and so we'll find out what their last Pokemon is. And it's going to be the Flutter Mane. I guess the Thunder Wave is a little bit bad because that means we can't Spore that slot, but at least we'll be able to outspeed it for sure. Wave Crash does go into the Gyarados and does a decent chunk of damage, but we're going to be statusing both their Pokemon this turn, which will set us up pretty good for the endgame. Gyarados also now will outspeed the Flutter Mane, so if I go for Waterfalls into that slot, they could potentially just get flinched. But yeah, Palafin's sleeping now, it's not going to be doing anything. And I outspeed Flutter Mane, but not with Amoonguss, so I'm just going to go for a Waterfall into the Flutter, and then a side Pollen Puff. But I wasn't sure if I'd survive a Moonblast from Flutter Mane, so I went with a Tera Steel here. I could have also went with a Rage Powder to be safe, and that way I also preserved the Tera. I also don't have to lose my resistance to water moves, but I didn't think the Tera seemed too useful on anyone else, so I just went with it on Gyarados. If I did have to pick someone else though, I'd probably go with a Tera Fairy on Flutter Mane for extra damage, but I don't really know if I need the extra damage in this battle. But here's a Tera Steel Gyarados. Palafin stays asleep because it is the first turn. And Gyarados is going to land a Waterfall into Flutter Mane. It does do less than half though, but Flutter Mane goes with a Thunderbolt into Gyarados. Good thing we went with the Tera Steel. We don't resist the move, but at least we're not taking 4 times super effective damage, so this Pollen Puff is going to heal us back up. So another Waterfall probably doesn't KO, but I think if I go with a Waterfall and Clear Smog, it just might. And Thunderbolt isn't really threatening me, so I don't really care what the Flutter Mane goes for. I guess Palafin could wake up, but it is just only threatening water damage, and it's not going to do too much into my Gyarados, because it is pretty bulky physically, and Amoonguss just resists it. But Flutter Mane is going to switch out this turn back into the Amoonguss, which makes sense. You're locked into Thunderbolt, and it's not effective into my Mons. Palafin gets a 1-turn sleep though, and they're going to be able to Wave Crash my Gyarados, but we survive on 3 HP, which is pretty clutch. This Waterfall is going to go into the Amoonguss, do a little bit of chip, and so is this Clear Smog. This chip isn't that much damage, but I think it's honestly pretty good because it will put the Amoonguss in range of an Ice Spinner for my Chien-Pao. This next turn, it seemed a little bit obvious for their Palafin to just go for a Jet Punch to finish off Gyarados, which I could easily Rage Powder away, and then I could taunt their Amoonguss. But I think they might try to get around this play by going for something else on the Palafin and then just attacking with the Amoonguss slot. So this turn I actually went for a side Pollen Puff and then a Thunder Wave onto their Amoonguss. Like, I have a lot of options into their Jet Punch play, so I don't think they'll actually go for it. Because I could either taunt the Amoonguss if I Rage Powder and taunt, or I could put the Palafin to sleep if they just Jet Punch. But my opponent is just gonna Jet Punch, which I did not expect. The Rage Powder would have been really good here, because my side Pollen Puff is going to do nothing. It does go before their Amoonguss, so it could be a potential speed tie win, could just be an outspeed, and they don't even attack with the Amoonguss slot, they just go with the side Pollen Puff. So a bit of an over prediction that turn. I could have just gone with the Rage Powder and taunt and then would have been fine, but I went with my gut and gave my opponent a pretty nice free turn. So I'm going to send in Chien-Pao next. This will threaten the Amoonguss here. So I know my Chien-Pao's threatening the Amoonguss, and I think my opponent's play here is to protect Palafin and then go for a Tera on Amoonguss, and then try to Spore my Chien-Pao, or maybe just attack it. I think my play here is to protect Chien-Pao and then Spore their Amoonguss, since if they Tera, they're able to get Spored, but that's not actually the play. I think the better play is to just Ice Spinner Amoonguss and then go with a Rage Powder, because if they do go for a Tera and then try to do anything, I can Rage Powder away their attack, and anything their Amoonguss might go for is going to be pretty worthless into mine. And we're just going to protect here. There's no Tera on their side, so this Spore play fails. Luckily their Palafin also just goes for a Protect though, so we're not losing too much this turn. But I'm pretty sure if I went with that play, I would have immediately just won the game, because we would have KO'd Amoonguss. They have a paralyzed Flutter Mane in the back that's most likely Choice Specs, so it can always Ice Spinner that slot. And then my Amoonguss and Flutter Mane should be fine against this solo Palafin. At this play, I'm just going to try and Ice Spinner the Amoonguss again, and then just Spore the Palafin since they just protected. This is opening me up to like a Tera on Amoonguss this turn, and then a Palafin switch into Flutter Mane, which would be pretty bad. So maybe I should have just went for another Rage Powder on my Amoonguss, just to stay safe from a potential Amoonguss Tera on their side. But there is no Tera from them or any switches. Ice Spinner's just going to KO the Amoonguss here. We still have a Focus Sash, so Palafin can't KO my Chien-Pao, even though we're not Rage Powdering this turn. And they're going to choose to go for a Wave Crash. They do a lot of damage, but since they don't have Amoonguss anymore, any recoil that they're taking is going to stick. And they're going to go to sleep here, which is basically going to seal up the game for me. Like I said, they have the paralyzed Flutter Mane in the back that's already chipped, so I can just go for an Ice Spinner into that slot. And then after that, I can just go with Rage Powders with the Amoonguss while my Chien-Pao finishes off the Palafin. This turn with the Amoonguss slot, I decided to just attack the Palafin because there's not much better I could do. I didn't want to bring in the Flutter Mane this turn because I did want the Rage Powder on the field just in case. But it is pretty free to just switch into Flutter Mane the next turn, and then with Chien-Pao and Flutter Mane just double into the Palafin slot. But instead I just went for a Pollen Puff into it. Palafin tries to go for a Protect or a Jet Punch this turn, but obviously it's forced to sleep at least one turn. Ice Spinner's going to KO the Flutter Mane here. But yeah, now we're definitely going to be winning. One thing I would want to change is I went for Sacred Swords here, but realistically I should have just went for Sucker Punch because it's going to do more damage, and it doesn't matter if they go for Protects or Haze because they have to attack to beat me. So the Rage Powder and Sacred Sword is a little bit slower, but it's still going to get the job done. Palafin wakes up here and goes for a Jet Punch into my Amoonguss. There's a little bit of damage. But yeah, another Sacred Sword probably picks up. I should have just Sucker Punched anyways. But either way, the game's basically sealed up here. I think that KO on Arcanine early was just absolutely huge for me and made the game so much easier, allowing me to make some pretty outrageous and unsuccessful reads, but still able to win. The switch to Lumberry on Gyarados is already feeling great. Like, now I can actually hit things when I'm facing Will-O-Wisp, even though I don't have that much attack investment. Like, it gave me enough damage that I could KO the Arcanine with the Waterfall, which was just huge. I thought I was cooking with those reads, but now I know the better plays in those situations. I also almost threw a little near the end of the game. Like, the Rage Powder Ice Spinner play is just so much better, but I'm glad that I see it now. Now, we do still have Flutter Mane in the back, so I'm pretty sure I'm safe unless Amoonguss goes down too. So I'll be trying these 4 again the next time I see pallets. My opponent is finally going to use their Tera on this last turn. But I protected my Chien-Pao here just to tease them a little bit, but they did correctly call the Protect, I guess, and go for a Wave Crash into my Amoonguss. Either way, that is too much damage for them to take, and they're going to knock themselves out. But GG's to my opponent. That was a pretty fun battle. For some reason I eat my berry at the end of the battle, but you know, it's okay. Amoonguss, have your snack. So overall, didn't play perfectly in these games, but I think I learned a good amount through making mistakes, and as promised, here are the 2 teams I plan to use in future videos. One of these teams looks like the one Paul Ruiz used in EUIC to get top 8, but it's not. This mouse ape is a Scarf Ape with a Population Bomb mouse hold, and I'll probably be using this for the 3rd Global Challenge for some fun battles. I also changed the Goldengo to my Series 2 Goldengo, but with Tera Water and Life Orb. I just think with a more offensive team that Life Orb might be more useful, and I changed Arcanine to fit one that I already had built. The other team is Joe Ugardi's team. It doesn't feature any Ruin Pokemon, but Garchomp is my favorite pseudo-legendary, and it's starting to see some more use in Regulation C. I guess the spread's here as well, and I also went with my usual set for Talonflame instead of going for the Flare Blitz one Joe was using, just because I didn't feel like changing the one I have. But that's going to be all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you made it this far, I hope you enjoyed your time, and consider leaving a like and sub to the channel to show support. I really appreciate it. Next video will be the 2nd Global Challenge, and I might try some live commentary for those battles for a change of pace, but we'll see. But until next time, bye bye!